Yo, dear listeners, hello and welcome back to the podcast. Today I have a return guest, Dr. Christle Guevarra, and we already recorded an episode all about semaglutide and other GLP-1s, and that was episode 131, called Semaglutide and Other Weight Loss Drugs. And today I'm bringing Christle back to talk about the lived experience of being on GLP-1 medications, essentially how to best make use of them and to lose fat without losing muscle mass. So, Christle, thank you very much for being back on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be back. And yeah, love to always chat about all things health and wellness and these new drugs that, have kind of really changed the game as far as fitness and health and wellness is concerned.
So, I am curious. I want to get an update on what you're doing right now, because the last time we spoke, you told me all about what you were doing back then, and now it seems like things have changed. So give us an update on what's going on in your professional life or whatever part of your life you'd like to share.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So wow. I finally am speechless in terms of all this stuff. So I am currently in Philadelphia and just started part-time work doing telemedicine and still creating more content. And there's a book that will be coming out and I'm still just writing. Nothing's really, shaped, but that idea came about during my Dr. Mike interview earlier that got released last fall in 2025. So just thinking about both the lived experience of being on a GLP-1 and then also being on the other side, being the prescriber who has just kind of, didn't really pay much attention to it until I myself, decided that it was time to be on this medication. So, yeah.
Oh, that's very exciting. I'm really looking forward to the book being released and good luck writing it.
Thank you.
And this only underscores that you are the perfect person to talk about this. So I'm going to go straight into the first question, and let me set the scene for it. Let's say that one of your patients is going to start a GLP-1 medication for the purpose of fat loss. What kind of changes can they expect to experience in the initial weeks? And you can also differentiate between different GLP-1s as necessary.
Oh gosh, that's a great question. One, there's a lot of different things that I love to sit down and have a conversation with these patients about. So one, probably the most common side effects to experience, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, potentially constipation as well. Like those are the kind of the major GI side effects that occur when you start these medications. And I want them to be well aware of the fact that, appetite may or may not disappear completely, especially on that initial dose. So everybody is different. The other things that I really try to hammer down as often and as early as possible is the scale is just one tool in the toolbox. And so the other things that we need to keep in mind are how you're doing in the gym, how are your clothing, how are your clothes fitting you, energy levels, libido, periods if you are menstruating. So all of that needs to be taken into consideration when you are purposely depriving calories from this person. And other things to expect. I've noticed that people really, and the reason why I bring up the scale part so very early on, and it's a constant reminder, is the general population is so used to using the scale as the only metric and always thinking like it has to be as small as possible, or I'm going to fixate on this particular number that I have in my head for whatever rhyme or reason. Could be I used to weigh X amount of pounds when, 20 years ago, or like this is just what other people my height are, weighing these days. When you start resistance training, it can be on top of a fat loss phase. It can be a bit of a, I don't want to swear online. I'm trying to think of the kind of term that would be politically correct. It can be a little bit of a mind, it can boggle the mind that there are people who may only on the scale lose 5 or 10 pounds in a matter of months, but because they're so new to lifting weights, that the body transformation, the body recomp is just that much more impressive. And so I want people to be aware of that up front, because people get really nervous about, like, I've only lost a pound or 2 pounds or 3 pounds in 1 month. So there's that. Um, and yeah, the other thing is that this is not going to be forever. Like, a fat loss phase is not forever. We're going to intentionally go in with a goal, and then we are going to intentionally get out. And during the post fat loss phase or the maintenance phase, you have your whole, we have a different set of goals to achieve. So this is just going to be one set, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, we'll see 10 weeks, we'll see how it goes, see how you feel. But once we decide that this is over, we are going to stop, and we are going to have a different set of goals. And for a lot of people who have a lot of weight to lose, also, I like to break things up into phases. Like, we don't need to crash and burn all the way down to the ground. I think it's also important to not just practice fat loss phases, but also the maintenance diet that happens after a fat loss phase. That is also just as important, if not even more important, than the fat loss part itself, because you're going to have to get used to not having that, like, kind of extra hit of dopamine when you lose, like when you drop, some weight, or, things are changing. Things are just going to be very steady. And for a lot of people, especially people who've struggled with their weight, sometimes that can be its own set of, like, that can trigger people's anxiety. So I always want to, keeping fat loss phases, very short, very distinct blocks, and scale is only one scale in the toolbox. So.
Excellent. And I want to cover diet and training as well. So starting with the diet, let's talk about the deficit size. So how would you approach setting a calorie target when you go on a GLP-1 medication?
I think the important thing with these medications is you have an idea of what it is that they're starting with. So making sure that you have an honest conversation with your patient or your client in terms of what is it that they're eating. So typically I like for them to track, and also tracking their food, weighing out their food, measuring their food. They may be at varying levels of that. Some people are very familiar with, like, something like, MyFitnessPal, they're used to weighing things out, and some people have just been winging it this whole time. So depending on where they're starting, I might not even use calorie targets as well. I'll look at, like, what it is that they're eating, and find a way to create, sort of give them suggestions on where to go. So for example, if somebody's eating out all the time, I'll look at what restaurants they're going to, and if, I'll help them make a different choice. Somebody's eating pizza all the time, maybe we can get, a salad with some protein in it, and then a slice of pizza instead of the entire pizza. And there's no one way. I think that is the biggest thing. And I think that's what makes coaching so special, is that you can't remove that human element of it. You can't, like, that, once the client or patient trusts you, they'll be open and honest. And so when, it really depends on where they're starting from. So, and sometimes I won't even give calorie targets. I'll just look at what they're eating currently, how they're preparing their food, and try and make suggestions, and then see how the scale moves, or see how their clothing fit moves, and kind of work from there. Because there are also a lot of people who are very anti-scale. And so I want to make sure that we're still kind of moving, towards a goal together, instead of shutting them down by saying, like, you have to do this, or you have to, adhere to this 500 calorie deficit weekly, target, where versus, like, hey, let's see, like, are you open and willing to, try to cook? And if so, or if you're cooking these types of recipes, can we swap out something a little bit healthier, or how can we tweak these recipes? I think that gets a much better buy-in than like saying, here's your meal plan with, chicken breast, broccoli, rice. You can only eat blueberries. The rest of the fruit is, going to cause fat, gain, and kind of go from there.
Absolutely, you're speaking my language. My listeners are well aware of how tailored my approach to coaching fat loss is. What I'm wondering is, when you're on a GLP-1 medication, how does this impact your caloric intake?
Oh gosh, for people who are hyper responders, a lot. I've seen hyper responders who will go the entire day without eating or drinking, and then 3 p.m. rolls around and they're like, "Oh, I'm lightheaded, I'm dizzy, I'm feeling faint. Let me get in something that's like calorie dense, and I'm gonna run and I'm going to eat something very tasty, something like pizza, and kind of go from there." And so, also, that's not exactly a great approach, but stuff happens. You have to learn that lesson in order to move forward. So I always want to, I always talk about these examples, but again, I wouldn't. I've made so many mistakes in the past, and you have to be okay and ready to make mistakes and learn from it. Like it's going to happen. Like I've done all sorts of dumb stuff too. That has happened to me as well, where I was sitting at my computer working, and I'm like, oh, I haven't, like, my mouth is dry because I haven't had anything to drink, and I am lightheaded and I am now hangry. I went from like nothing, 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 nothing to like, oh my God, I'm finally feeling hunger. Like, what can I eat that's like, small, because I know I have nausea, but also I need to make up the calories that I missed all day. So, um, yeah, you gotta, most people will end up feeling like that. So, one thing I like to ask is, how many meals are you missing? So, for somebody who's on a more kind of structured plan, or actually even on a not so structured plan, I'm like, how many meals are you missing? And not just like, I took a few bites and I ate it later that day. It's how many meals are you throwing away because, that day, because you really couldn't get to it. So, and then that becomes like something that we need to keep very close attention to, because the goal is to, yes, you're going to be in a calorie deficit, but you still need to fuel your body.
So, how many calories below maintenance would you advise people to go to? And so basically, how big of a deficit would you advise to be in? And if this is going to make more sense to people who regularly track their calories. So then, the other question I have for people who don't track their calories would be, what are some signs that your deficit is too large that people may and may not be aware of? So that somebody who gets these signs can, whether they're tracking or not, they might be it might get them to think, hey, I need to eat some more here because this is too extreme at this point.
I mean, I guess if I had to go, I guess to ballpark it, somewhere between 250 and 500 calorie deficit a week. Um, Nothing too crazy, but it is also going to depend on people's activity levels. And the other thing too is just making sure that, for most people, somewhere between 0.5% to 1% body weight loss on average per week, is also, kind of something. I pay more attention to the scale metrics than I do the actual number, because depending on who you've got people who, depending on their and the body, also metabolic adaptation, you've got people who at some point temporarily can handle, especially for smaller people, less than 1,200 calories a day, which I know is crazy. I feel like you should never go under 1,200 calories a day kind of mantra is, there's a lot more nuance to that. And for myself, during fat loss phases, I have had to go, somewhere around 1,100 calories. But thankfully that's not the case like I'm not in a fat loss phase anymore. So, um, yeah, so it really is going to depend on how fast they're losing the weight, and how they're feeling and how they're training.
That makes sense. So that's for calories. What about signs that you might be in too large of a deficit? And this could be also an opportunity to bust some myths that have been developing in the mainstream around Ozempic face and Ozempic butt. I've seen even that you might want to clarify for us, Crystal.
Yeah, the for losing weight too fast, the so now that hunger is kind of removed off the table, because previously, for when you think about natural body, or not actually even natural bodybuilders, or even bodybuilders deep into a prep, you notice they get a little bit more food focused. You notice their hunger goes up, but they can grind their way through it. And like after a show, they're like, I'm going to eat everything because like I'm starving and all of that stuff. So yeah, for on a GLP-1, that all of that stuff is removed. So now we really need to make sure that, and yes, not all of the hunger is removed, but it's not to the intensity that a lot of people experience. So the things that I keep in mind when people are in a fat, like maybe they're dieting too hard, is thinking about their motivation to go to the gym and resistance train. How are they showing up at work or at home? Like, are they on the couch lethargic, don't want to move, don't want to take care of your kids, don't want to take care of your pets? That NEAT drops drastically. Trying to go up the stairs just seems like a monumental effort. How's your sleep? Some people in a calorie deficit, and I remember having to experience this one personally. Deep into a calorie deficit, when you're not recovering so well, you wake up, very, surviving on little sleep, and then getting that when you wake up, you've got that like adrenaline rush, your heart's pumping, you're like, oh, I can take on the day, this is amazing. And for somebody who is like myself, a very high achieving type A personality, I saw that as a win. I told my coach that at the time, and he was like, nope, backing it off, we're going to do deload week. That is actually a sign that you are overreached, overtraining, and we need to take a look at your lifts, which were actually in the toilet at the time. And so it was like, no, 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 no. This is actually not a great thing, even though you think it is. The other thing, actually, the lack of hunger is already, if you're not on a GLP-1, that's another thing I would look at. But on a GLP-1, that's kind of a moot point. How are your periods? How are your tracking? Again, also libido. You need calories to support healthy hormone function. So all of that stuff counts. And then yeah, have you been irritable? Have you been snappy at people? That also counts too. Just because you are dieting, I find myself really thinking about the holistic picture, and I think that also matters too. Is how are you showing up in your relationships, your business? How are you showing up at work? How are you showing up at home? Have you been snapping at people? Have you just been dead inside? All of that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also wanted to add, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree,
Mhm.
but I believe that all of these factors occur on a spectrum,
Mhm.
meaning if the deficit is moderate or at the beginning of the fat loss phase, you might get a little bit irritable. You might not sleep
Yeah,
super well. And that's fine. It doesn't mean
yeah.
that your deficit is too large. It's just part and parcel of losing fats. But if the deficit is too large, or if you carry on dieting for a long time, then these factors become more and more intensified. And when they
Yeah.
become a problem in your life, that's when you might want to consider either reducing the size of the deficit or going back into a maintenance phase or taking a diet break of a few days to a week. What do you think of that, Crystal?
Oh, I 100% completely agree. Yeah. So even, a bad workout or two, or even a couple days, yeah, it all exists on a huge spectrum. Agreed. It's not just like they all don't happen like all at once. Sometimes they sneak up on you. So I think it's really important to just continue to have those conversations, because for a lot of people, I don't think people even like think about it. They're just like, oh, I'm just living my life. And I have been guilty of doing that a lot of times, until somebody points out, like, hey, that doesn't seem normal, or you just seem different. And it wasn't until somebody else pointed that out or brought up that conversation that I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Like so I think having those conversations often and checking in on those specifically often and early just helps keep that at front of mind, and so helps them try and be a little bit more self-aware.
I agree. Something I do in my check-ins, I provide a questionnaire to my clients, and whenever they enter a fat loss phase, after well, immediately actually, I as soon as they shift into the fat loss phase, I add a mini questionnaire called the diet fatigue questionnaire, where I ask them
Yeah.
to reflect on libido, mood, anxiety around food and fitness, and hunger levels and sleep.
Yeah.
And obviously, if it's their first fat loss phase, I introduce to them the fact that these will all change as the diet continues, and I need to know how they're changing so that I can help them become aware of whether it's too much, or whether it's connected to fat loss, or whether it's related to their lifestyle, just something happening in their life, maybe a bit more stress than usual, so that we can all understand how to best set up their diet and training to complement what's happening.
Yeah, no, I agree. The When I sort of check in, I guess I do have a little bit less of a kind of questionnaire, and I really think I probably should try and quantify it. I really do just be like, what'd you do this weekend? Who'd you hang out with? Those are the other things that I guess as a family medicine kind of trained doctor, like I want to know who's in your life too, because that's also super important to me. And how are they showing up? Like, what did you do? Did you, do you guys celebrate stuff? How do you, when you go out, like how is that? Do you drink alcohol? Do you not drink alcohol? How's your family doing? Because all of that plays into the success or not success of their fat loss phase. If they have a lot of chaotic relationships that are adding in stress, the whole thing is just sometimes can be the whole fat loss journey can be that much more daunting. And sometimes you do have to pull it back. Like, hey, it seems like, you're a single parent, you're working, you're also going to school, for a master's degree. And seems like, you got some stuff going on at home. How, is this the right time for us to start depriving you of calories if you really need calories to study, to be present with your kids, to handle the stuff going on at home, to be able to work, and those that's also important.
Absolutely agreed. Now, moving on from calories, I want to talk about macros. How would you set up macros for somebody who's obviously tracking them when they are on a GLP-1 medication? Or I don't expect that there will be a major difference between being on GLP-1s and not.
No.
But what I mean is, what kind of food choices and any other aspect of dieting changes or you pay more attention to as their doctor, as when they are on a GLP-1 medication versus not.
Yeah, I know the kind of numerical answer is somewhere around, like, I guess if you're American, it's like 0.73 grams per pound of ideal body weight. And then I think in kilos, it's like 1.6
That's
grams
for
per.
protein.
Yeah, for protein in and of itself. And then with the fat, it's, for a fat loss phase, I don't want to go anywhere under like zero point 0.3 grams. And then the rest gets filled in with carbs. That's kind of how I set things up and see how they do. Some people can tolerate higher fats and lower carbs. Some people can tolerate, the opposite. But I usually keep protein pretty steady, and I don't remove protein as a macro when I'm setting up the calorie deficit. Depending on how they respond, I'll either remove the calories to create the deficit from either the fat or the carbs portion of it, and kind of go from there. Um, and then also, again, for the general population, it becomes, where is it that they're at in life, and how are they, what is their current setup looking like? So, and also on a GLP-1, things are going to change people's sense of taste, things that they, especially with the nausea. So things that might be a little bit more palatable to get down, like ground turkey, ground meat, eggs, egg whites. Greek yogurt is also always a good choice if they can tolerate dairy, cheeses, lower fat cheeses or reduced fat cheeses. Um, so, and then also during a fat loss phase, I always try and encourage eating lots of fruit. Fruit does not cause fat, does not cause people to gain weight or gain fat. In fact, it's actually probably one of the best hacks you can have, particularly things with a lot of high water content, things like watermelon, cantaloupe, melon. Man, I wish I would have had that back in the day, because it would have helped me so much. I just had this weird aversion to fruit after I had a bodybuilding coach kind of tell me it causes fat gain. And so I stopped eating fruit, and then I just couldn't find myself. I didn't have the taste for it for years. It wasn't until recently that I'm like, oh, even strawberries are pretty freaking awesome. So I'm trying to get yeah. So health, yeah, it doesn't happen all at once.
And if somebody is struggling with nausea, apart from the foods that you've mentioned, are there any others or that food choices that you find are particularly well digested and also well tolerated?
Ready to drink protein shakes is probably going to be your best bet. Whatever tastes good is financially feasible for you and you are okay getting down. I think that's probably one of the easiest things to do as far as a supplement goes. The things that you may not be able to eat as all the fiber and all the other stuff. So things like broccoli might just be too much for you. So I try and I'm not trying to ramp up fiber intake depending on where they're starting too much. And then even for carbs, yes, fruit is important, but sometimes if you really can't get anything down, something as simple as toast, just regular bread might be what you have to deal with for the next couple of weeks. And it's okay. Just because, you're kind of having to a couple of weeks or even a couple months where, you're eating, not you're eating kind of whey protein shakes, which is a supplement, and not, having to eat bread, that's not going to kill you. It's not going to be the end of the world. This is just a couple of weeks in the span of your entire life. So
Also, there's nothing wrong with bread. I love bread.
I know. I love bread too. I know everybody's like, oh my God, bread is I don't know. There's so many weird takes on social media that it baffles me how the amount of ridiculous fear mongering that people put on social media. Yeah, there's nothing that's, completely terrible for you, but I know that everybody's so concerned with I have to eat perfect, have to eat healthy. No, you have to, you do you do the best that you can with what you got. And if somebody's dealing with nausea, things plain toast, bananas, maybe a little peanut butter, something that's palatable, that's not going to make you feel worse. And everybody's taste is different. So as long as you're getting some calories in and you're not starving yourself and you're not vomiting everything back up, you should be good.
Absolutely. Now I'm wondering then, on the other side of the coin, are there any specific foods that you've noticed for people on GLP-1s they can especially cause unwanted reactions like nausea, vomiting, and things like that?
Alcohol can really, because of the slower digestion of these medications, I'd be a little bit more cautious. Not that you can't have alcohol. I would just be very careful of how fast you drink alcohol. If you're somebody who, likes to chug shots, it might sit in your stomach a little bit longer. You might get drunk for a little bit longer. Some people experience heartburn after drinking alcohol on these medications. So I would just be a little bit more cautious of that. And then super high fatty foods, I find on average, people tend to not really do well. They start to get really kind of grossed out. So things that are pretty high in fat, things like mac and cheese, American barbecue, like the like ribs, like the fatty cuts of meat, can be a little bit more triggering for the bloating and just feeling nauseous. So I would be a little bit worried about that, but that's not to say you can't have it. It's just if you're going to eat, take a bite or two, see how you feel. It's not going to be the end of the world if you don't, if you have a bad experience, just don't drink and drive. there's my
Fair.
there's my
Fair enough. Since you brought up the slower speed of digestion and the fact that alcohol will stay in your system a little bit longer, I'm wondering, have you noticed any difference in the response to caffeine in people on GLP-1s?
Ooh, not that I honestly no. I haven't seen people mention that, nor have I actually asked people about it. So that is something for me to keep in mind, and that is something. Thank you for that. I something for me to kind of look into.
No worries. And I'm sure everybody's thanking me too, because since you said, well, no, nobody mentioned that, that also means that everybody can keep drinking their coffee.
Yeah, don't
So,
have
yes, you're welcome, everyone.
Yes. Oh man.
Anyway,
I
so next up.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
were you going to say
Oh, I
anything?
was going to say a lot of people don't have just reported that they're not really interested as much in drinking alcohol or even smoking cigarettes. So, two really big things that, positive things that are coming from it. People just already have an automatic aversion to it that seems, natural. And I know that there's a lot of ongoing research in terms of how these drugs can be super helpful in substance use disorders, other things like cocaine, heroin, or opioids, things of that sort. So, because of the fact that there are sort of dopamine pathways that are involved in reward, in hunger that is not physiological. So, there's a lot of crossed pathways in the brain in regards to all of that. So, I'm excited to see where this goes and how this can be helpful. But anecdotally, I have seen people quit smoking um, while on this medication.
Yeah, I find that really interesting as well. I am interested to see if in future years researchers and medicine manufacturers will be able to separate the various components of GLP-1s so that they'll be able to use some components to create a medicine that just affects these disorders, these addictions, and then just a medicine to target fat loss. I think that will be well, it will be world changing.
Yeah, agreed.
Anyway, so we talked at length about nutrition. Now let's talk about training. What do you
Yeah.
think is the most important thing, or things plural, for people to think about if they're going to start a GLP-1 medication?
That they find that they are consistent with a resistance training program. And it doesn't have to be super complicated. In fact, I would say that being consistent outbeats any perfect program, you know, any day. So whether it's, I think the biggest thing is just trying to figure out what is going to work for them. For somebody who's at home, finding some body weight exercises that they can do, or small amounts of weights or bands. And for people who are going to the gym, and the gym, even something like Planet Fitness, where it's like $10 a month for a membership. I mean, that is incredibly cheap here in America. You can get it done. 2 to 3 days a week, a full body split. When I have people start, I have them start with 3 sets of 10, a couple of exercises for the upper body, something for the lower body, and we go from there. Like, that's the bare bones minimum. It's really like when I'm dealing with patients who are on a GLP-1, that's usually where they're starting. Is they don't know what to do. Usually they're familiar with the cardio section, and that's all fine and dandy, and you can keep the cardio there if you really, really want. I just want to get more people interested in the weight room section. And for a lot of people, that, this is going to be their first introduction to the weights. Um, the and the reason why I do 3 sets of 10, really, it's because it's just easy to count. And there's no like, oh, I have to get 6 to 8 reps here, 8 to 12 reps. I'm like, 10 is a very easy number, and 3 sets of 10, also very easy to track. We can just go from there. And so, at least if they're not doing a heavy single and it's nothing, it would be enough of a challenge versus like doing sets of 20. So that's, I know that, people can have all sorts of opinions. We can move from there, but I think that's a fine place to start for a lot of beginners.
Absolutely. And that's in the interest of maintaining muscle mass as you are on the GLP-1 medication, I would imagine. I'm wondering if somebody is already in a relatively smaller body, in a body that's fit enough to engage in pretty high intensity cardio, be it
Okay. Yeah.
some running or some steady state running or some HIIT training, so high intensity interval training. They are also on a GLP-1. Are there any considerations that you would make, that you would suggest taking into account when programming cardio in the interest of not making the deficit too large and losing muscle mass potentially?
Yeah, that's with somebody who wants to do HIIT. I probably wouldn't make the calorie deficit so hot or so large, because of the fact that they are doing a lot of cardio. But to be completely honest, I don't see a lot of patients who are like, I really want to do HIIT training. I'm pretty fit. I'm gonna do all of this. So I I can't recall a situation where I've had to encounter that, but if I did, I would probably bump up their calories so the average weight loss wouldn't be too steep. And they would also have the calories to be able to perform the cardio appropriately, be able to perform in the gym appropriately, and still kind of lose weight at a reasonable rate.
That makes sense. I'm wondering then, do you set step targets with your clients? And if so, which step targets do you find seem to be helpful for people to encourage the deficit and also good recovery from resistance training while on GLP-1 medications?
That's always going to be a conversation between the patient in terms of what their lifestyle is like and how much, what do they have going on in the day. So if they have a very long sedentary job and then they go home and go from there, somewhere between 6 and 8 thousand steps on average. But then I also ask them how much more, I give them that option. It's like, hey, here's your weight. It's kind of stalling out. We can take one of two roads. One, I can remove more food from your diet temporarily, or two, we can really start keeping a much firmer track on your steps to make it happen. And most people actually pick the food part. And so we will go from there. It's always an ongoing conversation, but most people, I set the deficit with the food and I leave the cardio part or the steps part be, because people are
Yeah, that
just
makes sense.
leaving. Yeah. And especially for people who are working and a student, they're just at their computer a lot and there's no kind of way around it. I guess you could use a walking desk, but, a lot of people will just kind of say, I'm okay with less food. Like, all right.
I suppose the medication makes it easier as well if they're less hungry, so why not?
Yeah. Yeah. And I've got patients who were on a GLP-1 and then had to stop for XYZ reasons, and they're still doing good. So, all hope, like, I know that the literature says that a lot of people gain the weight back or majority of the weight back. It's really going to depend on a lot of things. It's going to depend on how you feel, how the behavior patterns that you've got. So, all is not lost. If you start and stop a GLP-1 medication, we have options.
Especially if you take the opportunity while you are on a GLP-1 to make substantial changes to your lifestyle and create a and create healthier habits, I think once they've been ongoing for a while, it's certainly at least a little bit easier to maintain them, even if you're not on a GLP-1, and even if some of the food noise comes back. Although it obviously, as you say, depends on the person,
Yeah.
Crystal.
Yeah, and anecdotally, I've seen people who have struggled with their weight for their entire lives, who have had all of the kind of the right behavior, lifestyle, prioritizing protein, resistance training, being active, have come off of the medication and have reported to me that yes, sometimes the food noise goes up, but after a while, it seems like it's okay. So that initial kind of being on the medication really helped regardless of them being on it or not. So I think there's so many different ways in which these medications have been used that the literature just hasn't captured all of these different case scenarios. And I think it's really important to stay open-minded to people's lived experiences. How are they on the drug? Because I wouldn't have figured that out if I was just reading the literature and not actually talking to people and asking them how are they feeling.
Very interesting. I'm wondering if I can ask you a personal question about your
Yeah.
experience with GLP-1s.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, when you go through fat loss phases now, do you still use them? And do you also take them when you're at maintenance calories?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now I'm still on I'm still on the medication. I'm on a very small dose of tirzepatide now, and I never came off of the medication during fat loss phases. And I can't even remember the last time I ran a fat loss phase. It must have been in 2024, maybe. Um, and the and yeah, the dose. So yeah, the dose was a little higher. It was never, I was never at a maximum dose of a GLP-1. And I struggled with that quite a bit, especially towards the last couple of pounds, the last like 5 or 10 pounds, because then you get into the territory of, is this helping me? Am I feeling, I let other people's judgment about what I should and should not be doing kind of get to me. But I think it's also important to think about with the everyone always asks, like, is it okay if it's the last 5 to 10 pounds? Like, is that okay for somebody to be on the drug? And the truth of the matter is that I don't know. That's not enough information for me to give a legitimate answer. You have to sit there and get more information on the patient before you can act and can make a decision as to whether or not this medication is correct for you or not. So I'm still on a very low dose. I'm on the very lowest dose a week, and I'm in maintenance. And ironically enough, once I got to Philadelphia, because my lifestyle has changed, my calories have actually gone quite up. So I am eating the most calories I have ever in my life. I'm at 2,500 calories a day on average, but also my average step count is somewhere between 12 and 15,000 a day. Because of the fact that I have a city dog now, and so I have to walk her. I can't leave her to roam freely in the 8 acres of land when I was in Michigan. And I do jujitsu. I would twice a week, 2 to 3 times a week, but some combination of drilling and open mat. So it's a lot more. I'm a lot more active nowadays, and I don't know what came first, the fact that I slowly started to increase my calories and then my activity level jumped up, or my activity level jumped up and I just let my hunger naturally increase itself until my calories got up to 2,500. I couldn't really tell you which came first, the chicken or the egg.
And you also lift on top of
Yes. Oh,
all
yes.
this.
I lift 3 days a week, full body split. It's a floating split. So it's not like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's, if I can get to it today or tonight, it really doesn't matter, just as long as it's 3 days a week on average.
That makes sense. All right, I was curious about that.
Yeah.
So thank you for covering all of these questions about basically life on GLP-1s. I'm wondering, as we get towards the end of the podcast, I want to make the questions a little bit broader. Now, you are making a lot of content on GLP-1s, and all this content is really helpful.
Thank
Now,
you.
there is a lot of content in general on these medications, not all of it as helpful as yours. I'm
Oh,
wondering, since you are in this space and you are essentially specializing in making this kind of educational content, what have you noticed in terms of other content that you think is a misconception about GLP-1s that is leading people astray?
I think the fear mongering about Ozempic butt, Ozempic face, I think those kind of sensationalized headlines, um, was sensationalized headlines without the nuance, I think can be very harmful. And it's hard to think about, is it like because things are getting buried in the kind of caption and people are just paying attention to the headline and not reading anything else, or some combination of both? I think anything that makes people scared is just not a great take. And I think the other type of content that, especially now that physicians are really getting big on social media, is the reacts kind of viral call out culture. I think also is not super helpful either. That's just not my jam. I'm not interested in internet wars just because that, to me, takes up a lot of time and personal energy that I could be spending somewhere else, that I could be helping somebody do something versus arguing on the internet. And so I have seen a lot of my own colleagues who are like, oh, I need to be viral. So in order to do that, I need to start doing that polarizing type of content that's sensationalized. And I just want to tell people that you don't have to do that. I know that the algorithm isn't going to favor that, but again, what is the purpose of your content, and is it actually going to drive conversions? If that is your goal, if your goal is to get more patients, like, where are they coming from? Are they really coming because they saw a viral TikTok reel, or is it because they got a referral from a friend who saw you as a doctor and they thought you were really helpful, or somewhere else? So
Thank you for that. I had another question. Now
yeah.
that to follow up on that, and now it's escaping me. Well,
I was
it'll come back to me
okay.
eventually. So you said essentially sensational content like that fear mongers is not ideal, and also react videos not ideal. Um, it really is not coming back to me. I thought if I do a little quick
Oz-
recap, it will come back to me, but no.
Ozempic butt, Ozempic face.
Oh, you know what? It's actually unrelated, but I
Okay.
wanted to ask you, since you are
Yeah.
based in the States, so
Yeah.
my understanding is that there are pharmacies that are providing compounded versions of
Yeah.
GLP-1s, and then there is the original manufacturer's version as well. What's the
Hmm.
difference between the two?
Yeah. The compounding pharmacies, and I'm still learning about compounding pharmacies. If I may misspeak. So, from what I know, compounding pharmacies have been around for a while. It's not necessarily, so for example, if you are somebody who needs a feeding tube and can't swallow pills, um, plenty of people, that happens to people. You need to go to a specialty pharmacy and get your blood pressure medication changed so you can, so you don't have to swallow it. It can come in liquid form. So these pharmacies, yeah, are not like this new phenomenon. So for a lot of these compounding pharmacies, they are able to essentially make the same drug with the same active ingredient. There may be a bit differences in the filler of the filler parts to it, but the active ingredient is still the same. And the kind of problem with that is there may not be as many and I don't know if this is necessarily a how much truth there is to this. what things that people are concerned with is kind of sterility, like how sterile is this compounded drug version. Worried about it not being as effective as the real thing. And I'm still not really, I'm still on the fence about it, because I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is, if you're a physician, having things like a certificate of analysis to kind of see like how much of this drug is in there, and actually taking a look at the process of the pharmacy to see what kind of regulations that they have in place to ensure that everything is sterile, everything is by the book, and that they're doing their due diligence to provide the best medication possible. The so having talked to people on sort of the compounding pharmacy, I've talked to people who are kind of in the gray market to kind of see how that all works, because that's completely different as well. I'm still doing my research, and I have not currently worked with a compounding pharmacy or talked to people, established a relationship with a compounding pharmacy. So it's hard for me to say. I understand that the concerns are real, but also I'm not quite sure how overblown they are or how hyped they are. I think because there's less of regulatory oversight, that there is room for variation. So not all compounding pharmacies are the same. So you have to be careful with what place you're picking. And I would hope that physicians who are referring patients to these compounding pharmacies or ordering from them already did their due diligence to ensure that that compounding pharmacy is, up to speed and up to order on everything.
Thank you, Krista. I appreciate the transparency with that answer. Now, on that note, I believe you've covered all the questions that I had. Is there anything that we've not touched on in enough depth, or we've not touched on at all, that you want to mention before we wrap up?
I think it's important for people to realize that this is an ongoing, lifelong process. So everybody who's concerned about, like, if I don't lift weights, I'm going to lose all my muscle, or I'm going to get Ozempic butt. This is, this is just a very small time frame in like the entire life. I've been doing this weight loss journey for actually 20 years to this day. This was 2006 graduation. I was 200 pounds, 4'11", and a pack a day smoker. And graduated from undergrad. 20 years later, here I am. And everyone's like, what did you do? And it's like, man, I was in the fitness space back in 2009, got on Instagram in 2014 or 15. So I've been around for a number of years and made so many mistakes. I've done so many dumb things, learned so many good lessons along the way. And I think, for people who are just starting in their fitness journey with the kind of help of these GLP-1s, this is going to be a lifelong thing, and it's okay. And you're going to make mistakes. And as long as you keep an open mind and keep yourself aware of what's happening and figure out, what can I learn from this? What is this teaching me? I think you'll do just fine in life.
Thank you for that, Crystal. Now, if people want to connect with you and follow along so that they can get your book when it comes out, where should they head?
My Instagram is Dr.Christle, CHRISTLE. And then my website is drchrystle.com.
Excellent. I'm going to put all of the links in the show notes. And with that, Crystal, thank you very much for coming on the show again. Listeners and viewers on YouTube, thank you very much for tuning in, and I will talk to you next time.